The year is 1189. In the heart of Japan, an army of thousands of samurai, the warrior elite of a nation, comes to a dead stop, paralyzed by terror. Their target, Koromogawa Castle, is in sight, across a narrow wooden bridge that serves as its final gateway. But the path is not blocked by a barricade, nor by a phalanx of soldiers. The tide of steel and ambition is held back by the solitary figure of a warrior monk, a giant over 2 meters tall, stained with the blood of those who have already tried to pass. With a defiant smile on his face and an arsenal of weapons on his back, this man is not simply defending a bridge, he has become the bridge itself, an impassable wall of flesh, bone, and a loyalty so absolute it defies death itself. To the thousands of warriors watching, the scene defies all military logic. They are an ocean about to crash against a single rock. Victory should be a formality, a simple matter of time and weight. Yet, fear is an older and more powerful emotion than strategy. In the figure of that monk, they do not see a single man, but an oni, a demon risen from legends to claim their souls. Every warrior in the front rank knows that to cross that bridge, he must first face that force of nature, and the dozens of bodies already littering the path or floating in the river are a silent testament to the futility of that attempt. The battle has paused, suspended in a moment of terror and awe. But the story being written on this bridge is not that of an impossible military victory, but the chronicle of the most supreme and pure act of loyalty in the history of Japan. The legendary defense of Saito Musashibo Benkei is not a desperate attempt to survive, but a deliberate choice to die with purpose. By transforming this narrow passage into a death funnel, he has nullified the overwhelming numerical advantage of his enemies and forced them to fight on his own terms. His victory will not be measured by the number of enemies he defeats, but by every precious second his sacrifice buys for his lord, so that he may face death with the honor that the betrayal of his own blood has denied him in life. The man who stands like a mountain in the middle of the bridge is Saito Musashibo Benkei. He is not a simple soldier, but a Sohei, a warrior monk, a living contradiction of faith and violence. His legend precedes him, a giant over 2 meters tall, possessing a strength said to be superhuman, and famous for carrying an arsenal of 7 weapons, from a naginata to a war axe. His emotional state at this moment is not the fear or desperation of a cornered man. It is the fierce, serene calm of one who has already accepted his own death. For Benkei, life is already over. All that remains is duty, the final and purest act of service to his lord. He does not fight to live. He fights to die correctly. His cause is not the defense of a fortress, but the embodiment of absolute loyalty, the fundamental principle of the warrior's code. His lord, Minamoto no Yoshitsune, is the most brilliant and charismatic general of his generation, a tragic hero who led his clan to victory in the Genpei Wars, only to be betrayed by his own brother, the jealous and paranoid Minamoto no Yoritomo, who has become the first shogun of Japan. Yoshitsune, the hero who unified the nation, has been declared an outlaw and hunted like an animal. Benkei fights not for victory. He fights to give his lord the time needed to perform seppuku, the ritual suicide, and die with the honor that betrayal has denied him. Facing this pillar of loyalty is the tide of the new power, the forces of the shogun Yoritomo. Their mindset is that of a wolf pack that has finally cornered its prey. They are filled with the confidence granted by overwhelming numerical superiority and the certainty of being on the winning side of history. They are an army of hundreds, legend says thousands, of professional samurai warriors, men trained in the art of war, eager to claim the head of their lord's last great rival and win the favor of the new ruler of Japan. For them, the solitary figure on the bridge is not a hero, but the last annoying obstacle between them and final glory. But in their overwhelming strength lies their fatal blindness, contempt. They see a single man and assume an easy and dishonorable victory, a mere formality before taking the castle. They are incapable of understanding that they are not facing an ordinary soldier, but a force of nature, the living personification of Bushido in its purest and most terrifying form. Their conventional tactical thinking shatters against the reality of a man who follows no rule but his own will. This inability to process the threat Benkei represents, to coordinate an effective attack against a single choke point defended by a demon, becomes their tactical ruin and the birth of an immortal legend. The stage for this legend is not a vast plain, but a narrow strip of wood suspended over the Koromo River. The bridge is the great equalizer, the silent character that dictates the rules of this impossible confrontation. Its narrowness is Benkei's greatest ally, as it transforms a battle of thousands against one into a brutal and exhausting series of single duels. It denies the attackers their most crushing advantage, the weight of their numbers, preventing them from flanking, surrounding, or overwhelming their sole opponent. It forces them to face Benkei in his own element, on the ground where his giant strength, his incredible reach with the naginata, and his indomitable spirit are insurmountable. The bridge turns the battlefield into a corridor of death, and Benkei is the executioner waiting at the end. The genius of his plan lies not in a complex tactic, but in the terrifying simplicity of an act of pure will. Benkei does not build a barricade. He is the barricade. By planting himself firmly in the center of the bridge, he becomes a human gate, completely redefining the rules of combat. Every samurai who desires the glory of claiming Yoshitsune's head must first pass through him, one by one, and pay the toll in blood. This confrontation is about to become the ultimate test of Bushido, the loyalty of a single man against the ambition of an army. To witness this clash of steel and spirit, and to see how Benkei's legend was forged in blood, join our Legion of Chroniclers by subscribing and leaving your like. The first wave is about to crash against the rock. The wait is over. Driven by the promise of glory and contempt for the solitary obstacle, the bravest and most ambitious samurai of Yoritomo's army launch the first assault. With war cries that tear the air, they run across the bridge, the thunder of their sandals on the wood like the roll of a war drum. They are the spearhead of an army, experienced and proud warriors, and in their minds, the death of this insolent monk is the first step towards the shogun's favor. They see one man, but what they do not understand is that they are charging against an ideal, a force much harder to kill than simple flesh and bone. The first wave crashes against the rock, expecting to shatter it. Benkei does not move. He remains planted in the center of the bridge, feet apart, as if his roots sink into the wood and anchor in the riverbed. In his hands, his iconic naginata, a curved bladed polearm, does not tremble. It is not just a weapon, it is an extension of his will, a steel quill with which he will write the final chapter of his life. His eyes, calm and focused, watch the advance of the enemy tide. There is no hatred in his gaze, no fear, only the absolute concentration of a master craftsman about to begin his final work. He measures the distances, the rhythms, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash his contained fury. The first samurai, a warrior adorned in ornate armor, comes within reach, his katana raised, ready to deliver the killing blow. The clash of steel resounds in the air, but it is not a duel of equals. Benkei's naginata comes to life, not in a simple slash, but in a devastating sweep. With a flick of his wrist, he parries the katana and, using the shaft of his weapon, strikes the warrior in the chest with a force that breaks his ribs and sends him flying backward, knocking down several of his comrades. Before the second can react, the curved blade of the naginata descends, splitting his helmet and his skull in two. The first blood has been shed, and the tone of the battle has been brutally set. What follows is not a battle. It is a slaughter. Benkei becomes a whirlwind of destruction, a demon of war in his element. The narrowness of the bridge is his greatest ally, forcing the enemy army to face him in a thin line. He wields his naginata with terrifying mastery, not only to cut, but to hook, sweep, and leverage. He hooks a man's ankle and throws him into the river. He uses the shaft to break a knee. He spins, and the blade takes down two men at once. The bodies begin to pile up on the bridge, creating a gruesome barricade of flesh and steel that further hinders the attackers' advance. Every man who falls becomes part of Benkei's defense. The legend, born in the blood and terror of this day, claims that Benkei killed over 300 samurai. Though the number is a product of epic storytelling, the reality must have been just as terrifying. As his naginata splinters or becomes slick with blood, he abandons it and, with incredible speed for his size, unleashes another of the 7 weapons he carries on his back. A war axe that crushes armor, a longsword that decapitates with a single blow. He becomes a living demonstration of martial mastery, adapting to the flow of combat, each weapon a new instrument in his symphony of death. He is a one-man army, and he is consuming the enemy army. The momentum of the initial charge, fueled by arrogance, fades and is replaced by something far more primal: fear. The warriors in the front line, who have seen Benkei's superhuman strength and relentless fury up close, begin to hesitate. They no longer see glory on the other side of the bridge, only a certain and gruesome death. The man before them does not seem human. His eyes burn with a fanatical light, and he shows no signs of fatigue or pain. In their minds, he ceases to be a warrior monk and becomes an incarnation of Fudo Myoo, the Buddhist god of righteous anger, sent to punish them for their betrayal. The advance comes to a complete halt. The army of thousands is paralyzed. The samurai in the front rank refuse to take another step, their feet nailed to the wood by terror. From behind, officers shout orders, and the soldiers in the rear ranks push, creating a chaotic pressure. But fear is a more solid barrier than any order. The bottleneck on the bridge is no longer just physical, it is psychological. Benkei has created a dam of terror that stops the tide of steel. He still stands, breathing deeply among the corpses of his enemies, daring them with his gaze to send the next man to die. For the commander of Yoritomo's army, the situation is an unbearable humiliation. His massive force, the pride of the new shogunate, is being held, ridiculed, by a single monk. Honorable combat, the duel of samurai against samurai, has failed in the most spectacular and shameful way. Every second that Benkei remains standing is an affront to his authority and that of the shogun. He faces a choice that will define his own honor: continue to send his men to a useless death against this demon, or abandon the warrior's code for a more pragmatic, although infinitely more cowardly solution. Ambition, finally, triumphs over honor. With his face flushed with rage and shame, the commander makes the decision that will condemn him in history, but give him victory on the field. He shouts an order that breaks with centuries of samurai tradition. Archers, forget honor, kill that man, fill him with arrows. It is the acknowledgement of his own impotence, the admission that they cannot defeat Benkei as warriors, but must execute him like a cornered animal. In that instant, the roles are reversed. Benkei, the outlaw, becomes the only true samurai on the battlefield, while the shogun's army abandons Bushido for the simple, brutal efficiency of death from a distance. The sky darkens. On a single command, hundreds of bows are drawn, and a cloud of arrows rises, whistling through the air before descending on a single target. The intimate, brutal sound of steel clashing against steel is replaced by the impersonal hum of death arriving from afar. Benkei does not try to flee or seek cover. He raises his head to the approaching storm, accepting the end he knew was inevitable. The first arrows strike his armor with dull thuds. Others find the gaps, sinking into his shoulders, his legs, his torso. The blood, which until now had been that of his enemies, begins to pour from his own body. This is the moment that defines the legend, the Benkei no Tachi Ojo, the standing death of Benkei. Despite dozens, and then hundreds of arrows piercing him, his body refuses to obey the laws of mortality. He does not scream, he does not stagger, and above all, he does not fall. He remains upright, the naginata still clutched firmly in his hands, an expression of superhuman fury and defiance frozen on his face. He has become a statue of loyalty, a hedgehog of arrows whose will is stronger than the agony of his body. It is the physical manifestation of the spirit of Bushido. Death is not the end as long as duty has not been fulfilled. The rain of arrows ceases. An unnatural, awe-inspiring silence falls over the battlefield. The entire army of Yoritomo, from the commander to the last foot soldier, beholds the scene with a mixture of triumph and primal terror. Benkei is still standing, motionless, defiant, his body bristling with arrows. Is he alive? Is he dead? Has he become a god or a demon before their very eyes? The fear his image inspires is so potent that even after the storm of projectiles has ended, no one dares to advance. His ghost, or perhaps his pure will, continues to defend the bridge, having bought for his lord the last and most precious minutes of his life. The immediate political consequence of Benkei's last stand was as definitive as it was tragic. The time his sacrifice bought allowed Minamoto no Yoshitsune, along with his wife and children, to commit seppuku within the castle, dying with the honor and ritual calm that the samurai code demanded. With the death of Yoshitsune, the most brilliant general of his time and the last significant rival with a legitimate claim to power, Minamoto no Yoritomo eliminated the final threat to his authority. This allowed him to consolidate his control over all of Japan, establishing the Kamakura shogunate, the country's first lasting military government. The death of a hero at Koromogawa, therefore, cemented the power of his treacherous brother and ushered in an era of samurai rule that would last for nearly 700 years. However, the most resonant echo of that day was not political, but cultural. The story of the standing death of Benkei no Tachi Oho, transcended the annals of war to become a cornerstone of Japanese national myth. It was transformed into the ultimate parable of loyalty, sacrifice, and unwavering devotion, the pillars of Bushido. In the story of Japan, it is not conquerors like Yoritomo who capture the popular imagination, but tragic and loyal figures like Yoshitsune and, above all, Benkei. His story became a foundational myth, told and retold in countless no and kabuki plays, in woodblock prints, and in children's tales, teaching generations of Japanese the ideal of the perfect vassal. Benkei became the archetype of the faithful retainer, a symbol so powerful that his fame and legacy completely overshadowed those of the men who defeated him. While Yoritomo is remembered as a shrewd but cold and ruthless politician, Benkei is beloved as the embodiment of the heart and spirit of the samurai. He represents the idea that a warrior's true worth lies not in his victories or the power he accumulates, but in the purity of his loyalty and his willingness to sacrifice everything for an ideal. His defeat on the bridge was paradoxically his greatest victory, granting him an immortality in the soul of his nation that no shogun could ever achieve. In this way, Benkei's last stand became a powerful cultural instrument, a narrative used to reinforce the hierarchical and feudal structure of samurai society. His example served as a constant reminder to every vassal that loyalty to one's lord was above all else, even life itself or logic. His legend helped cement a social order where personal sacrifice for the good of the clan or the lord was the highest virtue. Benkei, the lone warrior monk, thus became the pillar upon which much of the ideology of the warrior class that would rule Japan for the next 7 centuries was symbolically built, proving that the story of a single man can be more powerful than that of an entire army. The rain of arrows has ceased, but a spell of silence and terror keeps Yoritomo's army rooted to the spot. Benkei is still standing, a spiky silhouette against the sky, his eyes open and fixed on his enemies, as if judging them from beyond the grave. Time stands still. Minutes pass, feeling like hours. No one dares to be the first to cross the bridge. No one dares to test the wrath of a man who seems to have defied death itself. His legend is being forged in this silence, in the cowardice of an entire army, terrified not by a living warrior, but by the specter of absolute loyalty. He has become an immortal guardian, his will defending the pass long after his heart has stopped beating. Finally, shame overcomes fear. A single soldier, perhaps the bravest or the most desperate, advances with infinite caution, his sword trembling, expecting the demon to awaken at any moment. He extends the tip of his spear and lightly touches the giant's shoulder. And then, the spell breaks. The Colossus, held up not by life but by the sheer force of his oath and the rigor of death, collapses with the crash of a centuries-old oak. In that instant, the army understands the magnitude of its humiliation. They had been paralyzed with fear by a man who was already dead. They had won the bridge, but Benkei had won immortality, proving that a man can be killed, but an ideal, embodied in an act of supreme loyalty, can never be defeated.